So Paul George signed a max contract with the Clippers, $226 million over the next 5 years. That might be counting this season, I don't know. He does have a player option in 2025, so the Clippers basically have about 3 seasons to convince Paul George to not start doing the whole trade rumors thing. Although if Kawhi bounces, then maybe that throws the whole thing into chaos. But good for the Clippers. They signed one of the 2 dudes they needed to sign long-term, so it makes their future look at least a little better. Now, Paul George has, of course, been a little wishy-washy in terms of teams he wants to be on forever and then not being on that team not long afterwards. But for the moment, we can just assume the Clippers have him secured and all that stuff. I mean, based on what Paul George said in the All the Smoke podcast, it suggests that he really believes that Doc Rivers was the main reason they lost to the Nuggets, which, of course, is not true. The players should be blamed a lot for that as well, but maybe getting Doc out of there and having Ty Lue be the guy just really convinced PG to hang around. Perhaps that's a sign that potential chemistry problems are not going to be as big of a deal this upcoming season. Of course, there's been at least some roster turnaround, the main one being Montrez not being there now. So if you want to be optimistic about the Clippers going into the season, I think that's one way to look at it. I think the next thing to think about is, will Paul George be really good for this whole contract? Because he's at least going to be 33 or 34, depending on whenever his birthday is, on the tail end of this contract. And, I mean, PG's dealt with some injury things. Of course, he had the really bad injury with Team USA. He had a hamstring that kept him out for a lot of the regular season last year. He dealt with the shoulder thing 2 seasons ago, and he's also had some quad and hip contusions along the way and whatever. But before this past season, he was pretty durable. He played about 75 games at minimum for 4 straight seasons. So all that combined with the fact that PG is a really good shooter, I think it's safe to say he can still be really good when he's 34, 35 years old, that sort of thing. Although, because he's not a great ball handler, I mean, he's not bad, but he's not great. Perhaps that combined with him losing a quarter of a step or so as he gets older could lead to him suddenly being more of a spot-up guy, catch-and-shoot guy. And then the other question would be, could he hold up defensively? I mean, 6'8", 220 pounds, he knows how to defend, 6'11" wingspan, so he'll probably still end up being a good defender until he retires, most likely. Whether you can just put him on star players possession after possession and feel okay with that, I mean, maybe it could fall off a little bit towards the tail end of the deal, but we'll have to see. Anyway, if Kawhi stays, then this is the Clippers for a while, which is, of course, what they'd want. If Kawhi is gone, could we see Paul George trade rumors happen like next offseason? I think given Paul George's history, yeah. But he also really wanted to be in LA, so he's got that going for him. Now, with all that being said, the Clippers are clearly committing to Paul George and hoping that he can be great. Like 28 points per game, OKC season, great. And if we look at that season, or that series against Denver, he averaged about 22 points. He had a couple of really good games against the Nuggets, but he was bad in the Game 7. I mean, he had 10 points on really, really bad efficiency. His true shooting in that game was 30%, with, of course, the signature moment being hitting the side of the backboard. So he's got to be better, whether that's getting better as a ball handler or whether that's being more assertive. I don't really know, but he just has to do it. And so now that I'm done talking about Paul George, I guess we can stretch this out to the Clippers in general. What else could we see the Clippers do this year? I mean, they've got some trade stuff. They've got Lou Will, Zubac, Kennard. The crazy scenario I think of is they trade all that for Buddy Hield. They would have to include a little bit more money to make it work, but, you know, the idea would be Lou Will's not good in the playoffs. Ibaka's better for them than Zubats, which I'm not really sure I agree with, but maybe they would think that. And Kennard could be good, but Buddy Hield's better, so there's that. Or you can just kind of do it for any guy who makes around 20-something million. I mean, they could put that together for Oladipo if the Pacers wanted more of just a safer thing than playing the Oladipo circus. If the Magic are ever willing to move on from Aaron Gordon, perhaps the Clippers could come in with that offer. Although Orlando probably wouldn't want Zubats. Another one could be like Taurean Prince with Brooklyn, if the Nets wanted to get some stuff for him. I wouldn't be shocked if Beverly got moved, just if they basically need to get rid of everybody who was there last season to accommodate Kawhi and PG. And that's kind of it for moves they can actually make. Of course, all their firsts are locked up. They can move their first this year after draft night, but obviously they can't do it right now. This also takes one big chip out of next season's free agent class, and we're going to assume that the Bucks are going to want to hold on to Drew. So we could have already seen two guys be out for next season, and so you take a look at it now, and, well, Giannis is still there. Okay. LeBron re-signed. PG re-signing is perhaps a good sign for Kawhi re-signing, if you had to come to a conclusion about that. PG, you know, he's of course coming back. I think Gobert is going to re-sign with the Jazz. Probably not for a max, but something kind of close to it. Oladipo is still there. I think you have to assume Drew's got a better chance of staying with the Bucks than he did re-signing with the Pelicans. So, you know, suddenly you take a look at it and it gets a little thin. I mean, Hayward signed the big deal with the Hornets, so he's out of next year's class. And Chris Paul, potentially the same thing. I mean, you imagine Phoenix is going to want to hold on to him. So, for what all that means, I don't know. But for all the teams that are holding on to cap space, it might just be Giannis or bust. So we'll see with all that. And there will still be good players available. There always are. Anyway, as for predicting the Clippers this season, I mean, eventually I'll get to the standings predictions and stuff, but I mean, a finals berth is still the expectation for this team. They're talented enough to do it. But it will be tough, and I think it's fair to have the Lakers not just above them, but the Lakers might just have their own tier versus everybody else going into this season, given how good their offseason was. So yeah, that's Paul George for you. For the sake of the Clippers' future, it's all in Kawhi's hands now. And we'll just have to see. But the Clippers have gotten 50% of their ultimate goal completed, so that's good.